Hi, and welcome to this webinar. My name is Dimos Georgokritsos. You might know me from the Airlock Academy, and here with me is Dr. Martin Burkhardt, who is the product manager of the Airlock WAF. And today we're going to present the new features of the Airlock WAF 7.3, which was released, I think, 2 days ago. Yeah, 2 days ago. And we will focus just on a few main topics. We're going to have a look at the bot detection and the bot management. We're going to have a look at some API gateway features we included. We're going to talk about the cloud support. Then there is a new feature which allows to change the level of the logging with the deny rules. And at the end, as always, we will have a few bits of other changes. And as always, it's possible to have a look at the complete release notes at the downloads page. So you can have a look at the download page, and then there you'll see the release notes where you can see everything we included within this release. Let's start with the bots. The challenge with the bots is that usually you have two types of bots. You have the ones you want to visit your web page. Depending on the web page you have, you're interested that the search engines are able to crawl your page. You might have a health monitoring from the outside, which you want to let pass through. You might be interested with job portals that they can see your page and put out your job application possibilities, and of course vulnerability scanning. If you bought a scan, then you want the scan to be able to pass through everything and scan your application and not be stopped by a web application firewall. On the other hand, there are DDoS attacks, site scraping, command spamming, fraud attempts, web attacks, and even vulnerability scanning, if it's not on purpose, is something you want to be able to stop. So the problem is you might have a tool which creates requests trying to penetrate your security, and normally those tools create a lot of blocks. And up to now it was like this, that the blocks were generating an event if so many blocks happened. And I was often asked, why don't we block the rest of the requests coming from this IP address? And this is exactly what we're doing now. So with the new feature, as soon as a number of blocks comes from the same IP address, the WAF will start to block everything, even the non-blocks, immediately, put the IP address on a dynamic blacklist. And as I said, the following requests will be blocked. And as I mentioned before, you still want some bots to be able to parse through your page. So you want, for instance, the vulnerability scanning to be able to try to create some blocks. And those you can let pass by a blacklist exception. So let's switch to the GUI. Here within the application firewall, there's the dynamic IP blacklist setting, where you can define how long the observation period is, what the numbers of blocks should be, where the threshold is of when do you want to put this IP on a blacklist, and how long the IP should be blocked after it's been set to this blacklist. Going to a mapping, any mapping actually, you will see that here within the IP rules, there's, beside the whitelist and the blacklist, there's now a dynamic IP blacklist part where you can tell the web application firewall to block those IPs which are on the blacklist. And you can also define if the blocks on this mapping should count to the dynamic blacklist, if all blocks, or only the deny rules. And what we will do is we will set up those blocks on every mapping. And I'm running a script on the background. The white requests are requests which are coming through with 200. The red requests are actually blocks. I set up one mapping. I go to the other two mappings and set this up for the other two mappings too. And activate. As always, provide a comment. And you'll see in the background that the script is going to continue sending requests randomly. And at some point, the threshold will be reached. And then every request will be blocked. So you see it's still not reached. It's just 2 or 3 of block requests, 4 or 5 block requests. And now it happened. It was 1 block request too much. And now for the next 2 minutes, it will block everything. And since those requests are counting to the IP blacklists, it will continue to keep this IP address on the blacklist. Okay. Let's move on to the second part, the bot management. Many of those bots don't have a cookie handling. They just send requests and don't care about the answer or what the answer tells them to do. So another part is the possibility to tell the application, if session handling is on, of course, that if we send a cookie back and the cookie doesn't come back, then block this user. If the user comes back with a cookie, of course, we think it's a normal user. And also here, we have the possibility to create an exception for those agents we want to pass, although they don't handle cookies. And this is under the bot management tab. So here you can enforce the client cookie support, create a whitelist of IP addresses you want to be able to pass through. If you have, for instance, a health checker which doesn't react to cookies, it will still be able to pass through. And then you have the possibility to either create custom bot exceptions if you have your own bot, or to create well-known bot exceptions, which means that you can check the user agent. But just having the user agent checked is not enough. You know, everyone can change the user agent. So there's also a second step where we enforce the source domain, which means that the source domain has to be out of a list of well-known sources, and only then the bot can pass. You can actually check the known user agents and the source domains here. Those are the ones we would let through if you click here this checkbox. Okay, then moving on to the API gateway features. Since the version 7.3, since this release, it's possible to track the technical client ID, or we extract the technical client ID out of the JOT token. And then you have an ID which identifies what software accesses through the WAF, the backend application. And of course, this is locked. So if you have a check at this test log here, you will see that within the dashboards on WAF application and API statistics, you'll have the normal virtual host and mappings. And here on the down, you will have the top technical clients. In this case, because it's a test environment, we have just one technical client, but you would see the use, which virtual host, which endpoint, what HTTP method a technical client was using, and therefore you could have a analysis of what is accessed by which technical client. Then the second change is also an improvement within our deny rules. REST calls often have their variables within the path, which means that sometimes it's not only a path which is set up there, but it's also some value which is written down there. And this triggered sometimes the deny rules with a false positive, because the deny rule we're handling those paths as normal paths. And what we're doing now is we split everything up, and we recognize those values as values instead of a path part. And therefore the deny rules are much more reactive to REST calls, including JSON within REST calls, and are recognizing better what calls are what are normal paths and what are paths which include values which should be treated as values instead of path parts. Therefore, there will be less false positives. There will be better protection of the path parameters, and also, there is, of course, the recognition for the policy learning, where the policy learning will be able to do according exceptions, where instead of just proposing the path, it will know, okay, this part is a value. I should treat this as a value, as a policy learning exception value instead of a path. Good. Then, since the release was 2 days ago, we are still on the path to it, but it will be that the release Airlock WAF 7.3 will be inside the Google Cloud Marketplace, which means that you will, instead of uploading the image, downloading it from us and then uploading it to the Google Cloud again, you will be able just to log into the Google Cloud and then inside the Marketplace, search for Airlock and launch it directly instead of handling the image yourself. Additionally to that, we have now a description, a documentation on how to put the image on the Microsoft Azure cloud. This is after the AWS and the Google Cloud, the third cloud we support, or we document how you can do that. So you have on the text on ergon.ch/cloud, you will have the cloud image documentation and the deployment guide where we describe on how you can take our cloud image and deploy it on one of those three providers. Then, still talking about cloud support, but also REST in general, we included some new REST endpoints. Up to now, we had the focus on deploying a mapping or deploying a configuration within different environments, and now we included even the possibility to change the node information, so you can change, as you can see here, the node information and the interfaces of an installation. You can change the routes, the network services. So if you have a new network services, or if you have changing, let's say, ICAP servers, you can do this automatically through the REST. You can exchange the license instead of going through the configuration center. The session settings, like the session timeout, can be handled through REST calls. And something which is very interesting for monitoring, you are able with Airlock WAF 7.3 to check the backend host status instead of going online and having a look at the configuration center and see that the backend is on red, and you can see in the log files that it's on red, or wait for the event. You can call a REST endpoint and check the status of an according backend host, and therefore react even faster than it was possible before. Then let's move on to another new feature which will allow you to easier to change the block levels of deny rules. So up to now, if you had set up deny rule on a standard setting, it was quite difficult to change it to a strict setting because you needed a complete new integration. And what we included now is the possibility that, additional to the block level, which still remains, it's possible to set up a logging level. So in this case, and this is why we included it now, so you are able to move away from legacy mappings. In this case, we have an old mapping which still has legacy deny rules, and you will leave the blocking level on that setting and set the additional logging, for instance, to standard or strict, and then the WAF will run with the same security settings, but it will log in the background what would happen if the security setting would be standard or strict. So let's have a look again at the GUI. I've set up here a mapping which looks like it has been imported from Airlock WAF 5, which was the last Airlock WAF with legacy levels. And the problem is if you dragged a mapping up since then and didn't do any changes, you might have ended up with a mapping looking like this. There are active deny rules or deny rule groups which are still set on legacy. This is also the reason why there is a warning. There are the new deny rules which aren't included automatically, which are just set to off. And those one you could already handle before Airlock 7.3. You could just set those to log only and then turn on, which would mean you wouldn't have any real false positives, but you would have a log running in the background and see what would happen if those rules would have been turned on. And now with 7.3, you're able to handle those here by telling the WAF to stay on the blocking level legacy and turn the logging on for standard or strict. So now this rule would run in the background or would still block with legacy, and the logging would run in the background, and the policy learning, of course, would log those blocks. You have to include the log only. You would see if it's log only here, and then you could accordingly create exceptions for false positives for this rule, which isn't on yet. But as soon as you finished here integrating, you will be able to set this rule to standard, and you will know, okay, the exceptions are already set. I won't have any false positives. And since this will be a lot of work, depending on how many mappings you still have on Airlock WAF 5 standards, we included a bulk change rule. So in the first step, you will be able to go through all the mappings or all the mappings. Maybe you can select them by a label, by labeling them with legacy, and tell the WAF, okay, wherever the security level is legacy, please turn the additional logging to standard or to strict. So we change this additional logging, going in there, having a look at the deny rules. You will see wherever there is legacy, the strict has been turned on. Then you would run those tests, use policy learning to include the exceptions. As soon as you don't have any exceptions, you can go online with those new strict rules. And also here you can use the bulk changes by going through and say, okay, everything which is legacy should be set to standard or strict, depending on what you chose before. And of course, you don't want to remove the exceptions, because the exceptions are those things which you included during the testing. Change this block level, and you will see that the warnings are away, which means the legacy rules are away, and you can move on with the new rules, which are really much better than the old legacy rules. And we really prefer them to the old ones. Okay, then let's go to the miscellaneous parts. We're almost up to 20 minutes, so we can finish before half an hour. For those of you using SNMP, since Airlock 7.3, it's possible to use SNMP version 3, which allows you to get information from the system to see how the CPU is doing, or how the system around the software is doing, so you know if there's any hardware problem. Then we included the mapping templates for Exchange and SharePoint 2019. If you are running Kerberos in the backend, it's now possible to do cross-domain scenarios with multiple domains in the backend. And we did Elasticsearch and Kibana upgrade to 7.3. You might have seen it before when I was logged into the log viewer. It has a new view. It has some new functionalities. For me, it's something which was already included as experimental in the old version. The autocomplete is now on every installation. So if you start typing, it will make suggestions of what makes sense to continue to type with. And here you see it makes even suggestions with things which are inside the logs. So you will see, okay, those are the things which are here. Those are the things I'm looking for. Let's go with the summaries. And you've already created a meaningful request instead of trying to type them in by yourself and not knowing what's going on. The other thing is, since we upgraded to 7.3, I don't know if you've seen it with the Airlock EM presentation or the Airlock EM release. Airlock EM is including with the new version the possibility to forward their log files or its log files to an Elasticsearch server too. So what you can do is, on one hand, open up this option on Airlock EM, forward the logs into Elasticsearch server, and on the WAF you can do the same thing by going to the log and report settings and set up a remote server. And when you push the logs from the EM and the WAF on the same Elasticsearch server, you will be able to analyze with the same Kibana both logs and be faster. Instead of switching between two applications, you can just parse through one log. Since the EM and the Airlock WAF are using the same request IDs and session IDs, and sometimes even the information within the audit token, it will be much faster to be able to analyze things between EM and WAF. Okay, so much about the features. As I said, the release notes include even more features which might interest you. If you want to have a look at those features by yourself, we will have an update training in about 2 months in February. This is the next one. There will be probably even more going on the next year. Just subscribe there, and it's even possible if you have something you want to have a look at to tell me or to tell us, and we might even include this this theme into the update training, so you will be able to have a hands-on experience on whatever you want to have a look at. And the second thing is, if you have a colleague which missed this webinar, or if you want to have a rewatch of the webinar, this is, of course, the screenshot from 2 days ago. So we are having a webinar since yesterday, so there's also one for tomorrow, the German version of the EM webinar. And we will put them, as we did with the old webinars, online with the slides you were just watching, and the record of this webinar, where you can just rewatch what I was telling it and now the whole time. Okay, then thank you very much. If you have any questions, there is a question tool which you can use. Don't hesitate to use it. Martin and I will answer them. I will turn off my microphone, so you can stop listening to whatever I'm saying, and we will stay online to see if there are any questions. If as soon as the questions will stop, we will just be sure, verify again, and then we terminate this webinar. Thank you very much for the attention, and have a nice day.